All right, everyone, we're going to try to get started here. If you are already logged in and listening, great. I don't see anybody that is on audio for, on their computer or their phone or whatever. So hopefully you've got your speakers up, right, so you can hear what I'm saying. If you have a question during the presentation, there's a little button on your control panel for GoToMeeting that's raise your hand, right? I'll try to pay attention to that. I do have a lot of people in this webinar, so we probably won't be able to have a roundtable discussion or anything like that, but these webinars are recorded. If you have registered for this webinar, you will get a link back to it, even if you don't listen to the whole thing now, right? Even if you didn't show up, we're going to give you a link back to this webinar so that you can review it at your leisure. Okay, so for those of you who are listening, right, this is the version, Retail Pro version 9 webinar for physical inventory. Okay, we do these a couple of times a year because everybody's got to do physical inventory, and usually if it's once a year or maybe not even that often, you don't remember the procedure well enough, right, to go on your own, right? So we give these webinars. There are recorded versions of these webinars on our YouTube channel going back several versions, right? So we take turns doing this because every trainer has a little bit of different perspective, right? We will be going through this webinar. You'll get an email. It's recorded. You'll get an email to link back to the recording. Okay. And before we actually launch into how the demo part of this, I wanted to make sure that you're aware that we do have these PDFs, right, printed things about how to take a physical that are, explain how to take a physical if you're doing it with a scanner, right? So if you rent our scanners and you do a physical, a sheet like this is available so you can go through the whole thing from top to bottom. If you have your own devices, like if you have the Dolphin device, or if you're using the mobile inventory on an iPod or iPad, right? We have a version that that shows that section, right? This one that I've got up on the screen, right, is these people count manually. They scan their inventory into an Excel spreadsheet, and then they import that spreadsheet into Retail Pro. So there's all different methods of capturing your counts. Okay, and we won't really specifically go over those individually. Okay, I say I've got a question. Hang on, I'm coming. You can't hear anything, right? So is Amber the only one who can't hear anything? Okay, so it appears like I am broadcasting, Amber. Okay, so oh, okay. So Marco can hear me. Connected with okay, so several people have reported they can hear me, Amber. So it is possible that you're connected to a computer with the speakers muted. I just sent you a note to that question. Hopefully you can figure that out. Whether or not you can hear me on this webinar, when you get the link back to the webinar, you will have audio, whether or not your audio was working during the webinar. Okay. Okay, let me get Amber. I can't. Okay, one more thing here. Just want to make sure. Okay, so I'm going to try to persist here. So, you know, I will circle back with Amber after the fact and make sure that she gets a copy of this thing. All right. Anyway, so if you what I wanted to explain, right, is if you're taking physical with you know, whether no matter how you capture the counts, right? We've got kind of a cheat sheet or a cookbook or an outline, right, of what things you have to do in order to take a physical. So we are roughly following this document in this webinar, and right, if you want a copy of this, then you can just email service, tell them how you actually capture your counts. So if you're using the Foundry Logic application, you're using an iPod, if you're using you know, our rented scanners or whatever, we just need to know which version to send you. Okay, so make sure that you take advantage of that, right? Or if you are going to book separate custom training for your PI, then we can give you that document at that time and go over it with you, make sure you're really ready. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start the process, and we always recommend that when you're taking a physical inventory, best practice is you're shutting the store down, right? So no merchandise is moving. You're not selling anything. You're not receiving anything. Everything is static, okay? And the reason for that is part of this process. I'm going to go to inventory. The first part of this process is to take a snapshot of your existing on hand, or some people call it freeze. Okay, but when you're taking a full physical, this is the way that RPro helps you make sure you're counting everything and comparing it to the counts properly. Right. So to make your freeze or your snapshot, you go to physical inventory and stores. Okay, and the first time you create an inventory, or you go into the snapshot or the freeze, right, you're going to be presented with this if your inventory or if your freeze or snapshot did not already exist. So you call this anything you want, right? So I call this test webinar 2020, right? It is going to have a date stamp on it when you actually created the start, right? You pick your store, right? If you are a single store, or if you are a remote store, in other words, you've got a central location and you have store out here, you will probably only see your store listed here, right? So check your store off. You can write some notes in here if you want. Okay, what this is doing now is this is making a list of every item in the inventory list and whether or not you have on hand. Okay, negatives, zeros, everything, right? So it's making a list of the current state of your on hand for every item in the system, right? So now, right, your job is to go count. Now, part of the training people on how to do an inventory is inventories are like, you know, 80% preparation, right? And so what you can do to prepare for a physical inventory is simple, right? Make sure everything's got a tag on it. Make sure that you know where everything is, right? So if you've got drawers, if you've got backstock, if you have stuff packed away in your garage, right, you need to count all that, right? So make sure you know where everything is, make sure everything has a tag, okay, so that when it comes time to go count it, right, you're not stopping in the middle of your counting process to figure out what the SKU is, or the item number, or the ALU, okay? And what we also recommend is that in your physical layout of your store or your backstock or what have you, is that you make a rough map. It doesn't have to be pretty, right? It doesn't have to be color-coded like this, but the zone, some kind of map helps you make sure that you count everything, right? So in this example here, where I've got, you know, flies in yellow up against the corner, right? That would correspond to what we would call a zone in the RPro count. right? So we would say, give somebody a scanner, right? Or give them, their count sheet, right? Go to the fly corner, right? And record counts for everything in this corner. Okay, that's a zone. Okay, and then when they're done with that, right, then they start a new zone, right, and count this first rack, whatever this is in the orange here. Count that first rack. That's a zone. Okay, and then on your map here, you can record, who counted it, right, and approximately what time they finished, just right on the map. Okay, so this is a way to make sure that you've accounted for everything in your store when you're doing a full physical, right? It's very helpful. We always recommend that you do this in some way, shape, or form, okay? So that, your backstock area, you've got, shelf 1, rack 2, however you need to cut it down, okay? So that you're sure you've counted everything. And when you're breaking things into zone, a zone should have, no hard and fast rule, but we recommend 100 to 200. This is distinct items, right? So if you have 100 baseball bats, right, that's not a zone. That's one item, right? So we recommend keeping the zone small because if you're using a scanner, it might take you 15, 20 minutes, right, to scan that many items, depending on how many, how awkward it is to pick up the tag and get it scanned, right? And so you break it into small chunks. It's less fatiguing, right? And if you happen to lose the counts, right, it's faster to recount, right? Instead of, losing 2 hours worth of work. Okay, so there's 2 good reasons to break things into small zones and organize your zone. This document talks a little bit about pre-counting. It is possible in backstock areas if you want to, pre-count them on a piece of paper, right? And so you have the barcodes on the piece of paper and a count of what's in the box, and you tape it shut, or a drawer or whatever. Tape it shut with the piece of paper, over the opening, so that if anybody has ripped into it to get anything out of there. Because if they have, if the tape's been tampered with, then you can't trust the counts. Okay, but you can put the counts on the outside, so all you have to do is pick up those sheets and get them entered into RetailPro when it's time to count. So that is a way to speed things along. You just need to make sure that if you pre-count, that stuff doesn't get opened up and moved to the floor or sold or anything else that would affect the on-hand in RetailPro. All right, so there's other notes in here that we're not going to cover, but organization is the any time spent in organization takes off of the time that it takes to go through your inventory and actually physically count it. Okay, so the day of physical inventory has arrived, right? You've done, you're closed the store, right? You've started your physical count, right? So this is currently contains a record of every item in RetailPro. If I go to PI inventory right here, this is every item in my RetailPro, and the start quantity, right, is what the system thinks I have. Okay, now you'll notice there's some stuff in here negatives. That's okay. What's going to happen is if you actually have any of these items and you count them, okay, we're going to do a reconciling adjustment to bring that to the count, right? If you're out of them and you're just overselling this thing for whatever reason, then we're going to make a reconciling adjustment to bring that up to nothing. If that's your count, if your count is nothing. All right, so I just briefly like to show that. That's your snapshot. Now, your job after that is to go out and count everything in the store as accurately as possible, right? And so, like I said, there are varying methods for that, right? Some people will use scanners that they rent from us, okay? And those, scanners, you would go out and you would scan, the yellow zone here, and then you would come back to RetailPro and empty out that or download that scanner into a zone. You would clear the counts out of that scanner, right? And then go back and and do some more, right? So when I talk about putting the counts in the zones, okay, we're going to go to this zones tab right here, okay? And then you can see here I've got a zone list. There's nothing here right now, right? So when you're ready to start downloading your counts, right, you create a new zone for your store, and you have like 20-something characters to name your zone. Okay, so I'm going to say this is my flies counter, right? Right, counter. Right, so this is my flies counter, that yellow section, right? So when I create that, I've created a place where I can download scans or enter counts, okay, into my zone. Okay, so I create my zone. I make sure I'm highlighted on that zone. I go to scanned. Okay, I go to add counts. Okay, and then depending on how I'm actually capturing my counts, I've got 3 choices here. Right, manual is what it defaults to, because manual lets me just type in items, right? So if you're doing the kind of inventory where you can carry everything to the computer, like we have some small stores, right, that if they're most of their clothing is hanging, right, they'll take a section, put it all in a rolling rack, roll it up to the computer, right, scan the items with their regular scanner, right? So I'm scanning an item, I'm scanning an item, right, and so forth and so on, right? So they can scan it right into the manual here. When I close it, you'll see the items back here. Okay, so that's a simplistic way to do that. If you have your Retail Pro workstation on a counter up front, right, and you have lots of tchotchkes or keychains or what have you that are close around there, right, then one person could open up a zone manual and just scan in everything on the counter. Okay, so that is one way of capturing counts. Another way of capturing counts, I'm going to stay in this same zone. Okay, go to add counts, right, is importing, right? So this importing is importing from a file that has been generated outside of Retail Pro. It can be, you can create your own file by scanning your counts into an Excel spreadsheet, okay, and then you can make a map, right, to import that Excel spreadsheet. And I don't think I've got any files on here. Sorry, I should have been a little more. Let's see, desktop. Let's see if I've got any kind of text file in here that would work. Nope. Anyway, so down here, right, you would have a map of an Excel that potentially has the first 8 characters in the Excel is your ALU, right? And the next 8 characters contains your count, right? So this is a way that some people do their Retail Pro counts. And if you want more information on how to get that done, this PDF here is actually the Excel friendly type. Is just way way down here. Sorry. Go on, Excel spreadsheet. There we go. So this one actually, this document actually explains how to create an Excel import file, right, and get it organized to import into Retail Pro. So if that's what you're interested in doing, we can give you this and review it with you, right? You also can use the import option if you have Regis or Washington Inventory Services do your count. They provide us with a file that has the ALU or UPC, right, and the count, right? And we import that using a map that matches their layout, right? So you have enter counts in manually, right, either by scanning or typing. Import a file that's generated either by Inventory Services or by yourself, right? And then the last thing is portable device. So portable device covers the scanners that we rent. Portable device covers the Foundry Logic devices. So if you have an iPod or iPad with the mobile inventory app on it, if you have a Honeywell Dolphin with the Foundry Logic mobile inventory on it, if you have we're selling a Zebra device now that has the Foundry Logic mobile inventory app on it, and then some people might have some Janums, right? That's an older device that we rent one form, and then there's another form that people have purchased in the past, right? So if you have any of those type of devices, right, then the portable device here is the way you set it up. This one happens to be configured for the Foundry Logic / Janum, right? So when I brought this up, right, I've got all these files that are sitting here waiting, from the scanner for me to import into RetailPro, and these should be named for the zone. So you can see this one that's PI section 1, right? So that's PI section 1, right? And so if I'm creating, well, I'll back up and we'll do that one. Yep, it timed out for me. Okay, so let's back up, right? And let's go new, okay, for a store, and I'll call this section 1, okay? Create section 1, highlight section 1, go to scanned, go to add counts, go to portable device, right? And then find section 1 on your list. Now we don't actually show how these counts got from the device into this window because that happens depending on what kind of device you have. You have to plug it into a cradle. Some of these come over wirelessly, and that's a little hard to demonstrate right when you're not in the same room with the device. Okay. But be that as it may, those I talk too long and I keep timing out, right? So I'm going to take PI section 1 and select it, right? Yeah, I'm waiting too long. So let me try this again. Portable device and PI section 1 is gone. I have to go get it. Hang on 1 second here. PI section 1. Open. Okay. And PI section 1. Select. There we go. Okay. So what this is an indication of is that there's some errors in the file. And those section counts there, I'm not sure where they actually came from, if they even belong to this database, right? But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click past this because we do talk about why, if you have errors when you're using a scanner, what can be done with that. So if you're importing, okay, or you're using portable device, chances are that those ALUs, right, they could have scanned anything, right? There are some instances where, like for Regis and Washington inventory services, we usually send them a list of our RetailPro SKUs, so when they're scanning, right, they can check to make sure it's a valid SKU. Okay, if you're using some of the Foundry Logic devices, same thing applies, right? We download an item list to the device so you can check as you scan. Okay, and if you're doing that, you're rarely going to see that, but if you're not doing that, you might see that. Okay, and everything, right, is an error because that thing came from a different database. All right, let me try. I apologize, I didn't check those out to begin with. I was just so happy to see some that I didn't have to recreate. So portable device, 110/2020. Let's try something relatively recent. Hopefully that'll be, okay, one item. That's an error, close, still no stuff. Okay, section, that counts 32. Okay, back up. Okay, let's go in here and just make sure that it's not lying to me. Scan. Yeah, not. Okay, so be that as it may, the lesson you take away from what just happened here, right, is if you're using scanners, particularly if you're using the rental scanners, right? We ship you the rental scanners. You get them the day-ish before your physical. They always set an appointment for you to make sure those scanners are hooked up, working, right, before your physical. Don't wait till the day of the physical to test and make sure your scanners are working. So check them out ahead of time, okay, and make sure that A, you can scan things easily, and B, that you know how to download, right, and that C, your ALUs are coming up, right? So the ALU coming up thing is probably the least likely to happen, right, unless you're using the rental scanners, because the rental scanners, we do not download the items to the scanner. All right, so anyway, you're going to be populating your zones with your counts. Okay, so you can enter the counts manually, right? You can import them from a file that's created by a service, right, or by an Excel file. Or you can use one of the scanners, right, to capture items and download them into Retail Pro. Okay, now one thing that we like to show people when we do this webinar is you have the option, right, of doing something like this. Let's say that is description 1. So, all right, so in your inventory list view, right, if you can filter, right, to a group of merchandise, like say all your books or all your this or all your that, okay, you can print an inventory count sheet. Let's leave that one right there, okay, and say all listed records. Okay, so you can print an inventory count sheet with the items that you're filtered to, and it has a barcode. So when we were talking about the whole pre-counting thing, right, if you have hats in there, right, and then there's a way for you to filter to just those hats that are in the box, you can make this count sheet, right, and then record or fill in your count for those things, seal up the box, tape this across the top, and hopefully it's undisturbed until you get ready to do the count. The other thing that you can do with this is you could say, I want to list all my X, right, like all my books, and this would print out, right, and then you can go around the store, right, and count your books. Now, this kind of blows your zone thing out of the water, okay, but it is a tool that some people use where they would print these sheets, right, and then manually record their count on the sheets, and then when it's time for physical or to enter them into the physical, they would go into Retail Pro. Let me get out of here, say no. Okay, they would go into physical inventory and zones, right, and then they would go into their section here, go to scanned, add counts, right, and then manually input, right, by scanning the barcodes off the sheet. So instead of carrying the merchandise to the Retail Pro workstation, right, they would take their sheet, go out, record their count on the sheet, and then come to a Retail Pro workstation, right, and scan the items off the sheet into a zone. Okay, now I didn't explain this where next item and quantity for current item. If you're using the manual entry, right, you might want to change this to quantity for current item. Okay, what that means is that if I scan an item, whether it's off the sheet, right, or typing it in or what have you, right, when I scan the item in, it's going to stop at quantity. Now, if it's a onesie, you press enter, you scan the next item. But if it's more than a onesie, it stops and gives you a chance to say, I have 5 of these. Okay, and then you press enter, right, and then it cycles back up, right. So if you're scanning off a sheet, right? You know, and you can, you know, lay the sheet down, you scan it, right, with your left hand, right, and then type the quantity with your right hand, right, or, you know, work in a pair, however you want to do this, okay? So you can get through a scan sheet, right, pretty quickly, right? And then what we usually advise when you're doing this is, you know, scan everything on a single sheet, close it. Once you close that, then that becomes part of your zone and it's quote unquote saved, right? Then you can go right back in and add counts, quantity for current item. Here's my next page. Okay, and then 3, right? So around and around and around. Some people will use this manual with sheets. Some people will just use it to input their leftovers or their errors or their weird stuff where tags fell off and they have a heap at the end of the session, right? That you know, that they need to manually enter into Retail Pro. Okay, so now that I brought up errors again, right? I wanted to go back and visit this, right? Where we're looking at the kind of, we've got some bad info in here, right? So if I click on the errors tab right here, somebody messed with this, right? Let's see. I'm going to add some columns here. Show all. There we go. Add some columns. Right. So this one didn't have any good items in my scan, so it's not illustrative of what you know, what would happen. Okay. So I have a display here in my PDF that shows what happens when you actually have some errors that look real, right? So this pop up here where it says RPro PI, some items are not found in inventory, that there's some flavor of that depending on your Retail Pro version. You know, the one that we have on this version is a little more verbose than this. It tells you how many items it found, right? And then it's, you know, moved them to the error view, etc. So some form of this pop-up comes, right? You click OK, right? And then you go to the error listing, right? So what it's showing you here is that zone, right? So that 3 right there, right, is indicating that you had some items, right, that were bad scans. This one I've got, you know, a bunch, right? So if I look at here, I've got bad scans 22. Okay. Now in my error box, right, if I had things where, let's see, let me try to zoom that up so you can probably read it, hopefully. Right, so this part with the green here, okay, what that's telling you is that there was this flower plate D8 garden, whatever it is, right? And then right next to it was something with the import ID 763592. So the import ID is this column all the way over on the left, right? So in between the flower plate garden and the tufted vinyl storage bench was this something that had a tag on it that says 763592. Okay, and for whatever reason in my example here, there's no scan quantity here. There should be, right? So scan quantity, right, is how many of them there were. Okay, now the scan quantity for the flower plate and the tufted vinyl bench, those will be 0 because those were not errors. Okay, but the one that's the blank row should tell you whether you counted 1 of them or 10 of them, so you have a fighting chance of finding it when you go out to the floor to look for it. Okay, so one tool that we have to help you with errors, okay, is if you highlight the section, right, or the zone, right, that you have errors in, and you click this print button. Okay, we at the Big Hairy Dog have this document design, right, that's designed to help you deal with errors. And if you don't have something that looks like this, let us know, because we have a template. We can just drop it in on your system so you have it. Okay, but what this is designed to do is to show you, here's what I scanned, right, and this is how many I scanned. Now, if my error listing corresponded, right, if my data corresponded to this, you would see the good item, right, and then the bad item next to it, right? So in this case, that top section would show the flower plate. It would show this thing in this blank in the middle with the import ID 763592, and then it would show this one, and that's all that would be up there, right, up on the top. Okay, so the top section is your error section. If something appears here with a full description, that's just a placeholder, so you know what the error was next to. That's it. Right. So the stuff that you counted, the good stuff, is down here. Okay. And so if you counted things in a zone and there were some errors, this zone document design will show you both the errors, what they were next to, and all the good stuff that you counted. Okay, and then up here, right, you've got a total count. So if you want to go back to the zone and double count, right, you know about how many items you counted. So this can be a really handy piece of paper. It is optional. You don't have to use it, but it can be helpful if you have errors. It can be helpful if you have a high value area where you want to have scan everything and then print it out and then have somebody go audit it or double check it. All right. Okay, so as far as errors go, you won't be able to do the next step or complete the next step until you resolve the errors. Okay, so when we look at our little piece of documentation here, okay, you may decide, right, to use what the find the correct item, right, and then go back to the zone and manually add it to the zone. Okay, some people, right, will say, okay, I got my printout, I'll figure it out, right, and then they resolve the scanning errors before they've actually figured it out. So either of those are valid. It just depends on how you choose to deal with your errors. Okay, so you either print this out, save it for later, or print it out and or figure out what all those items are. Okay, so that you can enter them later. Okay, once you're done figuring it out, or you've given up or whatever, you resolve. Right, so resolving will basically erase your error listing. Okay, so now if I go back here, I have no bad scans. Right. They just kind of disappeared into the ether, right? So unless I enter them back into my zone using scanned and add counts and manual, right? So unless I enter them in a zone somewhere, right, they've just kind of disappeared, right? So you counted them, they're not in your physical inventory counts unless you can come up with an ALU to use to identify them. Okay. Now we're going to back up here to the zone list. So you go through, you count everything. However you're capturing your counts, you get all those counts loaded into RPro. Okay. You merge the zones, right? And you can't merge it if you have an error, so you have to resolve your errors on that zone. You could still merge the other zones and deal with the errors later. Okay, but at some point before you're ready to look at your discrepancies, right, you need to merge the zone. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and just merge these two zones. You can merge them one at a time, right, or you can mark them, right? So see this green mark over here? You can mark, select all, okay, would mark every unmarked, unmerged zone, right? So you can mark them all, right, and then merge them all, right, at the same time. That's your choice, as long as there's no errors. Okay, so we're going to merge marked. Okay, so every zone we created has counts in it and has been merged. At that point, you go back to your stores tab. So if you have to go back out to Retail Pro and back into physical and into stores, okay, here's my my start physical, right? And I have 5 different items right in here for varying counts. So that's what this is telling me. Now, in a normal physical, right, you would go to the discrepancy tab over here on the right. Okay, And everything in my inventory list is probably a discrepancy right now, okay, because I didn't count everything, right? So if I look at the things that I did scan, right, none of those things actually had any on hand. So they're a discrepancy, right, as well as everything else in my inventory list because I didn't count anything, right? But the merge, right, gives you the capability of merging everything. You go to the discrepancy tab, you will only see the things that are different, that are discrepant, okay? If you had one on hand in Retail Pro and you counted that one, you're not going to see it on their discrepancy list, right? If you had 0 and you didn't count any, you're not going to see it on the discrepancy list. If you had a -1, right, you can't actually count a -1. That's not allowed. Okay, so if you had a -1 and you didn't count any, right, then that's a discrepancy, and we're going to make an adjustment of 1, okay, to bring you to 0 in the when the physical update runs. Okay, now this discrepancy view, right? You can see I sorted it right on scan quantity. Some people, say what are my worst discrepancies, right? So they want to deal with the worst ones first. Once you get your counts loaded into here and your zones merged, right? So now you can look at your overall discrepancies at that location, okay? And if it takes you, a day, 2 or 3, right, before you're ready to update this, you can still sell items, right? Because we know what we started life with, right? So here on the start quantity, right? That's a bad one. Okay, so we know at the time we did the freeze, right? We had 25 of these, 25 of these, and 25 of these, right? So if after I do the freeze, right, we count everything and we're too tired to deal with it, we go home and we're going to open the store the next day. If a customer comes in and buys all 25 of these sugar maple whatever they are, right, that does not affect your physical inventory result in the least, okay, because we had 25 when we did the counts, and if we didn't count 25, it's going to make an adjustment, right, for that amount back to the 25, not to whatever, the current on hand is irrelevant. We are affecting the current on hand, but only by what was different at the time we took the physical. And sometimes that's a difficult concept for some people to grasp, okay? But that's the reason you do a freeze or a snapshot, right? So it's a point in time where this is what I should have had on hand. The count should match this, right? If they don't, then I'm going to make an adjustment to make it look like, right, that's what I had on hand at that point in time. All right, so there are reporting here, doc designs. If you don't have the doc design for the discrepancy reports, we generally have 2 different flavors here. Then these are, our own that we've developed, right? So if you don't have these and you want them, just let us know, okay? Most people use the department one, okay? But, there are 2 versions. And what this tells you, right, is at the top, this is what my on hand was at my snapshot. Okay, here's what I counted. I counted things with no retail. How about that? Okay, and then this is my difference. Now this is everything, not just the items that are contained on this report. Okay, so if you have things where the system thinks you had one, right, and you counted one, they're included in this total up here, but they're not included in the line item on the report. Okay, so this report is designed to say, go down to, and scan through, the department totals, right, and see I'm missing $1,000 worth of whatever that is, probably shirts, men's tees, right? I'm missing 2,500 of Costco washer dryer. So, somebody ran off with 5 of my washer dryers. I didn't count them. Okay, so, this is designed to help you focus in on where you need to pay attention. Okay, If you're missing $2 worth of firewood, right, probably not going to chase that down. Okay, but if you're missing 5 washers, right, there's something wrong, right? You probably need to chase that down. Now, what you are not able to do is adjust whatever the start was. So for this washer, right, if it's like OMG, right, we should have returned, we returned those to the vendor and we forgot to tell Retail Pro, right? At this point, right, there's not an easy way to tell the system I should have started with 0. Okay, there's not an easy way to do that. Okay, so at this point, what we usually counsel people is, okay, so the system thought we had 5. We know why we have we don't have any, because we should have done an RTV, right? But we didn't count any, so the system is going to adjust those 5 out, right? Because we found this during the physical, right? And if it's a biggie like this, and you want to after the fact, put it, in an RTV or whatever, then you would do that totally outside of the physical. All right, so anyway, you can take this, you can print it, you can export this into Excel if you like to work in Excel. And if you find things that need to change, like if we found our washer dryers, right? I'm writing down the SKU here, 003416. Right, if you found those washer dryers because they were in the warehouse in a corner and you forgot that you had them, and you really need to add them to your inventory, okay, then best practice, okay, is to go to PI zones, create a new zone, okay, for the fixes or the errors or manual input or whatever you want to call it, right? So from an audit standpoint, we don't really want to open up a zone here and put it in a zone unless that's they were in the corner of that zone and your employee forgot to count them, and exactly where they were and why they didn't get counted. Then you can unmerge the zone and add them. I'm going to do it separately because I always counsel people to do it this way, so we know, oh, we added those later, right? If you opened up your the old zones, right, and you added it, there's no audit trail for that, right? It's like it was like you counted it that way in the first place, and if that's the way you want to show it, great. All right, so scanned, right, add counts, right, quantity for current item, because I have my SKU, right, and I have 5 of them. Oh, I have a couple of SKUs come up under the same item, but I know it's my Costco washer dryer because I was looking at it. All right, so I have the item. Okay, I'm going to merge that zone. Okay, so now if I go back to my discrepancy view, that Costco washer dryer is not going to be on it. Right, so if I merge my zone, I go back to my discrepancies. Right, I can filter for that SKU really quick here. ALU, okay, 00343416. Okay, this needs to be cleared. Yeah. Right, so it's not appearing here in my discrepancy view. It's in my physical, right? So if I go to this PI inventory right here, and I do the same filter, right, looking for the item, okay, there it is. And it's in there twice because I have a duplicate ALU, right? Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Right, so here are the, I had 5, and I just added 5 here. It's not on my discrepancy report, okay, but it is in my physical count, right? So when I update my physical count, no adjustment will be made for this because I found them and put them in there. All right, so in the process, right? We have, we're almost done. We've reviewed our discrepancies, right? And so we can report, right? Doing this kind of printout, okay? This printout, the the difference or the discrepancy printout is also available after you update, okay, which is important to know. When we update a PI, it's going to do two things. It's going to generate a big adjustment document, right, that that makes all the changes. Nope. Store zone discrepancy. Oh, I've got the filter on. Duh. Okay, so discrepancy, cancel filter, right? So if I updated this now, it's going to basically wipe out all my on hand, right? Which I'm actually not going to do. But if I did it, right, it would -1 that item. It would -1 that item. Wouldn't it would? Oh, what have I got here? This should have a 4, a 6, a 1, and a 3 in it. So am I in my discrepancy view? Let me back all the way out here. Physical inventory, stores, discrepancy. So sort. Hang on one sec here. Something is cattywampus. This might be because they don't have a retail. All right, I'm not going to spend the time to troubleshoot that nonsense. Okay, but with the update, right, anything where there is a discrepancy quantity here, that's going to be the amount of the adjustment. So in my sugar maple example, right, if there's 25 in my discrepancy quantity, that's going to be the adjustment that's made no matter what the current on hand is. Okay, so you review your discrepancies. You can print the discrepancy report after the fact, because when we update, it's going to create a big old adjustment, right? And it's going to put your physical into archive, right? So there's 2 tabs on the physical inventory thing here: stores archive and PI zones archive. I don't have anything in mine, okay, because I've never updated physical on here. Let me see if I have anything in sub 2. Nope. Okay. So anyway, once you update, right, it goes over here, and you can print. You can't change anything, but you can print and look and see what the state of the count was, okay, at previous physicals, which can come in handy, but you know, I can't actually show it to you on this one because I've never updated a physical. All right, so the last step, right, of your physical here is after you've merged everything. You can't merge unless you get rid of the errors. You look at your discrepancies. You make any corrections by going back to your zones and adding items. Okay, and then once all of that is done and you've merged everything, right, you're going to update PI. Okay, now when you update PI, right, we recommend that you use an adjustment reason code physical, right, because that'll keep the adjustments kind of separate from other adjustments that you do, okay, because we can report on the on the adjustments that are made by reason code, and also by whether or not the physical inventory process actually generated those. Okay, this area where it says options, that's really important, right? If the default is all inventory, that means whether or not I counted it, okay, I want the adjustment to be made. So in all those cases where you have -1s on hand, right, and you didn't actually count, right, then it's going to update or make an adjustment to bring that -1 back up to 0. Okay, so that's the default. That's definitely what you should be doing if you're counting everything in the store. Okay, the other 2 things here, right, have to do with cycle counting in some cases. We don't usually try to talk about here that much when we're doing the whole PI. So if you are interested in doing cycle counts, then you should review it with a trainer. just kind of quickly, just to make sure that that you're choosing the right options here when you're doing cycle counts. If you're doing a full PI, this is always the right answer, all inventory. And then down here, right, you need to explicitly select your store. It's not going to default to it, because if you get in here by accident, you can't actually update, right, unless you've picked the store, right? So it's not, you know, somebody's clicking around and accidentally update your physical. That's, you know, very rare that that's going to happen. Okay, so you pick your store and you click update. Now I'm not going to do it because that's going to wipe out all my on hand. Okay, but that is your last step. That is your, you know, you're done essentially. It makes a big old adjustment, right, and moves this count into archive. Okay, and if you found that you've made a huge mistake or whatever, things seem wrong, right, your first call is to the big hairy dog to help you sort through it. Okay, knowing that it is possible, right, to unarchive the last physical you did, right? But we've had people call and go, oh, you know, like I just did a physical and I updated it, but the last physical that I did 6 months ago was wrong. Can I unarchive that? The answer is not very easily, right? So if you've just updated physical and then you're go looking at your on hand or whatever, and it's, you know, it's way wrong and you don't understand it, have us help you sort it out. Save yourself the angst, right? And have us help you look at it and see exactly what went wrong and exactly what the easiest way is to fix it. Okay, I'm not going to update this now. Okay, but after you update it, right, those you know, those adjustments are made, right, and your on hand is now caught up. So if it takes you several days and you've sold things, then the adjustments are going to, you know, make whatever adjustment they need in order to have your on hand be in line with what you counted on that day minus whatever you've sold. Okay. Now, one thing that I didn't stress in the beginning, right, is if you're a multi-store environment, okay, you have, you know, a choice. You can go actually take the counts in the store. Okay, you can update them in the store, make the adjustments in the store, right, and be done. Okay, or some multi-store people like to have them do the counts in the store and have those counts communicated up to their main computer, right? So someone else up there reviews them and updates them. Okay, and that is a choice, right? And in general, right, if you need to make that choice, the place where that's controlled, okay, is options, system preferences, local preferences, merchandise, PI tool, right, and then in PI tool options. And it's this question mark right here. So if there's a checkbox here, that means that if you're a remote store, that you're going to be allowed to do your counts here, and they're going to be sent up to the main, where the main is going to actually do the discrepancy reporting and the update. Okay, so if this is unchecked, it means you're doing everything at, you know, on this local group of computers or store or whatever, right? So that means, right, that you know, you do your discrepancy report, you do your update, that creates the adjustment locally on your computer, and that if you're a remote store, then that adjustment document gets sent up to the main workstation to say, hey, they've done their physical, and here's all the adjustments that they made. So book that into the main, right, which is managing the on hand for all the stores. All right, so this is something, you know, we cover it in our written documentation, but it is something that has a tendency to confuse people, right? So if you're a multi-store, right, and you want to make sure that you understand what this is, spend a few minutes talking it over with a trainer or a tech here, right, and make sure you have it set the way you're expecting things to happen. All right. That was pretty good. Ran about an hour. And so again, right, if you would like to have some of this written documentation, right, all we need to know is what type of collection for the counts you're using, whether you're using a JANM, a Dolphin, if you're planning on rental scanners, or if you're just going to do manual counts, then we can send you the appropriate documentation that matches as close as possible with the way you're going to run your physical. All right. All right, so that was a lot. And like I said, this will be out on the wire probably by tomorrow. You should get an email linking you back to this this webinar, right? And if you have any further questions or want to book some individualized training, you can email service at bighairydog.com, or you can call our 800 line or the tech line. 800 line is 800-377-7776. Tech line 916-368-1070. Please let us know if we can help you customize your physical experience and hopefully take some of the angst out of getting a physical count done properly. All right. All right. Thanks for your attention.